Okay, good evening. Today I'm gonna do something a bit different. Instead of reading something from a published book, I'm gonna read something in the making. And this is Luang Por Pasanno's biography that Ajahn Kai and me are writing. I'm writing the Thai version of it, and Ajahn Kai writing English version of it. And I pulled it out. Like I have to rephrase and kind of summarize them into this special draft that is a mix of Ajahn Kai manuscript and the translation of my Thai manuscript. So if sounds something weird, you must know that it's my translation. So without further ado, part 1. Why am I here? What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a minister. This answer from a 4-year-old boy might have made the parents smile, but they would likely not think that it was going to be true a few decades later. Though it's impossible to know if the answer came from the simple innocence or from past karma, it foreshadowed the boy's search for meaning in the coming years. It was a moment of relative calm in the world. The fires that has consumed Berlin and Hiroshima has cooled, while those that would soon devour much of Asia will only just kindle. Though increasingly bound to international trade, Manitoba's capital fell distant from the century's fiercest storm. It was a province of boreal forests and frozen rivers, bordered on the south by grassland and wheat fields, and on the northeast by Arctic rim Hudson Bay. The province's isolated center in particular navigated more by nature's winds than the world's. Face turned by necessity to confront gales that blew in every winter from the freezing taiga forest. Leonard Reed Perry was born July 26, 1949, to Rhoda and Ken Perry in Winnipeg, Canada. Working as a bookkeeper for a big construction company, Ken had to move his family around the city from time to time. Nevertheless, Reed's childhood always found the embrace of nature, as the bush was the backyard wherever he lived. A big change in his life happened when he was 9, when his father resigned from his job and made a move again. Nicknamed the Gateway to the North, the parents' new home, almost 400 miles up north, represented the northernmost outpost in Manitoba, where crops managed to crawl out an existence against the subarctic winters. The Perrys arrived to find the past rough edges still intact, its culture of simplicity and self-reliance preserved against progress by isolation and the elements. Where Winnipeg has a population about 500,000, the PA held only about 5,000, many of which were miners, loggers, trappers, and others who made their living carrying wares to those who lived in the north frozen reaches. As railroads tapped the northern Tigers' vein for ore, the town formed into an administrative outpost for the northern industries of resource extraction and reply for its workers. For a time, boosting the highest per capita liquor sales and venereal diseases rate in the country. Dazzled and confused. In many ways, Reed's character mirrored that of his home. Like the Pa, he was hardy, warm of heart, and interested in life in near the elements. However, the introverted and shy character kept him feeling alienated throughout his youth. Quote, miserable, confused, that is a fair description of my teenage years. My difficulties at that time were ordinary stuff of a teenager, just trying to figure out who you are. Social relations were a bit difficult, a source of suffering for sure. I think teenage life is difficult for everybody, trying to figure out social roles, dealing with the opposite sex, all of that. It was just difficult being a human being. I was quite shy and self-conscious, so that was uncomfortable. On a certain level, I seemed to have plenty of friends, but I never really felt content. I don't know how other people perceive me, but I know how I felt. Just kind of hopeless, incompetent, and very uncertain around people. Everything was worth worrying about, thinking about. I was a worrier, fearful and anxious, and I held it in. It was a good way to upset your stomach. I had a pre-ulcer when I was 16. It was just a part of my temperament, but it affected me physically. While he tried to fit in as best as he could, drinking and smoking with his friends and getting into occasional fight, Reed's disconnect ran deeper than simply shyness. There was something in him which the past and its horizons could not satisfy, and a sense of genuine disenchantment with society's value haunted him. Even church, which, when he was a child, promised deeper meaning, stopped making sense as he grew up into his teens. Quote, I really wasn't satisfied or happy because one of the things that helped me as a monk is that I enjoy reflecting on things that are meaningful. So as a temperament that doesn't hold you in a very good state as a teenager, it's a good way to make yourself miserable. Try to think about something meaningful, but it just seems really meaningless. Of course, I had a warm family and good friends, but I also was quite dissatisfied and looking for something more to life than just this. I wasn't entranced or desirous for a life of seeking money or chasing after a good name. It didn't make any sense to me. And a part of it is, when you feel that, but the world holds it up and others are kind of excited about it, then you think that there's something wrong with you. I must be some kind of weird oddball that doesn't fit in. You try to share it with your friends when you're growing up, and they look at you and, what's wrong? Even family, you ended up keeping your mouth shut, keeping your head down. And how do I get out of this? Escape from the bush. Reed's need to escape the confines of the small town of 5,000 drove him to take summer jobs with the railroad in the forest north of the park. However, the temporary reprieve failed to address the angst that plagued him. In 1968, he applied to the University of Winnipeg. The spectrum of people he met there is a genuine source of interest to him. Quote, I enjoy the learning, not so much what I learn in my classes, but just being in university with different people, thinking and having discussions is what very fruitful. Reed's restlessness mirrored that of the culture. The 60s found a generation searching for meaning beyond the material development, which had by necessity occupied their parents following the war. Disillusioned with a society whose external focus and spiritual poverty they felt had led to existential nuclear threat and an unending war in Vietnam. The baby boomers searched for a new paradigm. In casting about for new cultural values, the 60s turned its gaze east. Asia's kaleidoscope of traditions, from Zen Buddhism to Hindu mysticism, aligned with the hippies' emphasis on nonviolence and introspective practice. However, it wasn't until his first year in the university that Reed began to sate his curiosity about Eastern culture. Quote, there, I was able to take a course in Eastern religions and immediately was stuck. It looked at Hinduism, it looked at Taoism, it looked at Confucianism, Shinto. But Buddhism, okay, this really makes sense. Most books Reed's encounter pointed to the mind as the chief cause of suffering, encouraging him to initially consider a psychology major. However, he soon found the discipline didn't provide the answer he was looking for. Quote, I started studying psychology because I thought, obviously, my mind is where my dukkha is. So how do I understand the mind? But the more I study psychology, the more I begin to think, These people are really messed up. This is not inspiring. They don't really know. They got you training rat, observe the rat behavior, and that was psychology. It's really frustrating. So I didn't put any effort into that and failed. Total dissatisfaction. Reed search for meaning soon reached a dead end. Enthusiasm crumbled to boredom. Quote, I knew enough to get by, but didn't care enough to do very well. It was more interesting to party, go out, and skip class. I was looking elsewhere. And even at that point, Buddhist practice was the only thing that really makes sense. I didn't know how to go forward. I didn't know how to explore it. I didn't know where to study. Amidst the endless flood of people and vehicles that are flowing relentlessly and chaotically to their desired destinations, someone might be doubting, why am I actually going? Why do I have to go back and forth like this? Why will this eventually lead me to? Entering adulthood with a hollow unable to be fulfilled, with the apparent walk in his life, Reed dropped out of the university after a couple of years there. Quote, I was really fed up. I had been questioning everything. I was dissatisfied with everything. Total dissatisfaction. Nothing makes sense. The world didn't make sense. Studying didn't make sense. Relationships didn't make sense. Nothing was making sense. A lot of frustration. Everything just seemed a waste of time. When living in his home country seemed to be empty, Reed set his eyes on a bigger journey. He went back to the park and worked at a paper mill there, with the hope of earning enough money to travel abroad, but didn't forget to bring some books that he could find to his night shift, continuing the glow of spiritual search inside. Nevertheless, he found out that his financial discipline was hopeless against the budget for having fun. He then decided to have a short, clear goal that he could hook himself to, which was going back and completing university last year, but with a little tweak this time. Quote, I ended up majoring in history, even though it's looking back, it's actually about real people, real circumstances, and how people live together. So it gave more a sense of understanding human behavior. Journey to the East. With studies finished, Reed decided to travel to the country where so many of the Zen books he had encountered originated, though he decided to take a quote-unquote scenic route through Europe on his way to Japan. Quote, my idea of going to Japan came because I was interested in Buddhism. It was the only thing that made sense, and sense appeared to be the most accessible and focused on practice and meditation, which was the essence of what attracted me. I thought I could go to Japan and study Buddhism there, but I was also young and wanted to gain experience, definitely wanted to take a long way around, to travel around Europe, to go through the Middle East, India and Nepal, and then I hope to go to Australia, work for a bit, get some money, and go to Japan. It was toward the end of 1972 that Reed wrapped things up and left his house and family in the park behind. But it wasn't until early January of the next year when he left, with his two best friends from childhood, Dennis and Dale, accompanied him on globe-trotting. The three first landed in Dublin before traveling on to London and Amsterdam. Once they reached the mainland Europe, they bought a Euro monthly pass, not only to save transportation expenses, but also accommodation costs. Quote, we could sleep anywhere. We got on the train, stayed for 24 hours. I just thought of curling up in some kind of boiler, sitting somewhere, sleeping, and then you arrive in the morning. Okay, let's go. They hated me for that. From the islands in the Mediterranean to the ski town in the Black Forest near the Alps, travels were eye-opening. Quote, The experience of seeing different cultures, different ways of living, the sense of wherever you grow up, that's what we take as what is normal. But then you realize, well, there's no such thing as normal. There's different ways of living and being. There was a different level of actual security and comfort. It wasn't chaotic or anything, but these definitely were poorer countries. Once the trio reached Rome, they received news from Canada that caused him to go back early, though the other two continued their journey across Eurasia. Quote, I hitchhiked from southern Turkey up to Istanbul. I met a lot of really good people. One especially was a piece of luck. I got picked up by a van with 3 Turkish guys. The owner was a jazz musician who had played in Sweden for the last 9 years. I traveled with them for 3 days. Along the way, he kept stopping to visit friends. They were very devout Muslims, but they wanted to show their culture. They took me to a mosque, and as a guest, I wasn't allowed to pay for my meals wherever we went. Everybody I met was super friendly, and they really took me under their wing. And then I remember hitchhiking from Turkey up to the mountains, freezing cold. Didn't realize the mountain is so high there. Then got a bus into Iran, got down to the bus station in Tehran, ended up spending the night at Hilton Hotel in Tehran. The reason we stayed there is because it was under construction, so we stayed with the rest of the homeless people in the construction site. In Iran and Afghanistan, I was fascinated by the people. People had real heart in their kind of commitment to family and friends, very, very strong. So if you were accepted, then you were family. I didn't really get a sense of hostility. I felt looked after. The turning point. Khyber Pass marked another transition on the route, as Reed and Dennis entered the Indian subcontinent. But the unforgettable heat of summer soon drove them up north to a little market town hidden in the cooler Himalayan ranges. Quote, it was Manali in Kulu Valley, Himachal Pradesh, about 5,000 feet elevation, cool climate, extremely beautiful. We rented a house with 2 other guys and it cost next to nothing. And it was very comfortable. We were in a tiny village with 15 to 20 buildings set in apple and apricot orchards and wheat fields. It's up above the town where we could walk down to the market to get food and supplies. There's a fairly large river coming through the valley, almost in constant rapids. There are also hot springs for bathing on the other side of the town. At the house, if you look out the front porch straight across the valley, you will see the terraced fields break into thick evergreen forest. To the right, the snow-capped peaks command the view, giving us a taste of what the higher Himalayan ranges would be like. There's a waterfall coming down from the slope on the left, where you could hike up. Every day, there will be somebody coming down from the higher pastures with fresh milk, so then you will have milk and tea. It wasn't so well known then. There were only a few people, only a few Westerners, and it was a good group of people. So I have got the most beautiful place I have ever been in the world. Good people, perfect climate. There are not many places I have ever been that are this close to paradise. And I was still suffering. I had been traveling, and it was fun. It was interesting seeing beautiful things, but it's obvious that I wasn't going to find the end of suffering in any external condition. It is just this real strong sense of dissatisfaction. It isn't a path that's going to lead anywhere. I had to figure out a way to train my mind. That really stuck with me. From boreal forests in northern Canada to the University Intellectual Society to a paradise at the world's end, it's obvious that nothing could fill up a hollow deep inside Reed's heart. Although the young man still had a craving for external experiences afterwards and didn't give anything up right away, at least he knew which direction he needed to go. After about a month living in a heaven on earth, Reed and Dennis still have not enough of this. They have heard that another place that will possibly offer the same experience is in Nepal. However, on Friday the 13th, July 1973, on their way to Kathmandu, fate took its turn. On the letter Reed wrote back to his family 2 days later, it reads, "Now the big news. I'm back in Delhi as we got our passports stolen in Kanpur on the way to Nepal. We had them and all the valuables, i.e. traveler's checks, international health certificate, etc., in a small bag which was lifted from us while waiting on a train platform. Luckily, I stuck some rupees in the book which would not fit in the bag, and we had enough for the train fare back to Delhi. But yet again they met nice people on their way, as if there was an unseen force pulling them together. As the duo headed back to the hotel their last day in Delhi, the owner not only let them stay for free, but also fed and lent them some money before they could get their temporary passport reissued. They reached Kathmandu safely a couple of weeks later, but yet their cash was almost exhausted, and neither Nepal or India is a place to do a secure money transfer. Finally, they decided to use the last bit of money to buy a plane ticket from Kathmandu to Bangkok. Quote, "I came to Bangkok because they have a stable banking system. I didn't even know that Thailand is a Buddhist country. I mean, I stumbled into it. Really. It just dawned on me. And as soon as I got out of the airport and into the city, I immediately felt at home, immediately felt comfortable, a very strong affinity. And then there's so much feel of the culture and the cultural expression of temperament, sensibility and whatnot was all conditioned by Buddhism. Everywhere you went, there are temples and monasteries. So then, I can learn a bit more here. Okay, I gotta stay and study at one of these temples somewhere." After about 8 months traveling together, Reed said goodbye to his friend Dennis, who went ahead to Australia, planning to meet up with Reed there in several months. However, this was not to be, as Reed remained in Thailand for another 23 years. To be continued.
Thank you. Ajahn, I'm curious about the process of gathering information from Luang Por Pasanno and just the process of speaking with him about his history and anything you would want to share with us there.
Yeah, one of the things that is really special for us working in this project is, I think a couple of years ago, Rhoda came to us with a box of the letters that Luang Por wrote back to Rhoda since he left the house. So we got more than 100 of letters, originally come from 1973 and something, all the way down to 1997 when he was here. So we got almost the whole history of his life, at least a part of it. And yeah, just kind of, so it's very detailed accounted. And yeah, I mean if you talk with Luang Por, because he graduated in history major, so whenever he talk about history, he will have this kind of like the, how do you say, interesting kind of like side note that he come up with. And because on the way that I omit all the details, that when he traveling to Thailand, he will stop here and there. Like for example, in Toledo, he split from his friends in order to go to Toledo alone to witness the El Greco. He was an artist, El Greco painting in a particular church in Toledo. That he will have this kind of like interesting in kind of history, go to a lot of museums in Austria, and then whenever he go to, and then I mean, life of young adults, they want some experiences, and then boom, in Manali, this is not going to lead to anywhere. I was still suffering. This totally dissatisfaction still haunted him. If you read many of Kubajan teachers' biographies, there will be some moment like this, that it have a seed of, this world not just right. It's something wrong in this world that pushed them out of the worldly values and something.
Ajahn, do you know how many years was Luang Por in Thailand before he met Luang Por Sha?
Oh, that is in part 2, but I can tell you right now. To be continued. Spoiler alert. He met Luang Por Sha only a couple of months after he arrived. After he ordained. He arrived in late August 1973, and he ordained in January 1974. And then only kind of like 6 weeks later, he asked permission from his teacher in Bangkok, because he ordained in Bangkok, not in Ubon. So he stumbled upon a kind of like Ajahn Chah's teachings excerpt in the library there in the monastery that he ordained, and then I got to see Luang Por Chah, and then go to see him. But no spoiler here, it's just but he didn't stay at the first time, so he go back to central Thailand and spend his first vasa in central Thailand. But in the vasa, he kept thinking about Ajahn Chah, Luang Por Chah, and then after the vasa, he decided to, I'm gonna go back and give myself to be Luang Por Chah's disciples. This is in part 2. This is in part. Hopefully, I can pull every part out, every single part out for the next time. I just only finished the first part.
I was just curious. You've been writing this for the last couple years, right? Something like that. And I was curious maybe how this process or all this interviewing, reading Luang Por's old letters, how that has, if there's stuff that you've taken away or stuff that ways that this has impacted your practice, things like that, insights that you've gathered from this, anything like that.
Okay. Each part has its own theme. Like for this part, the first part, it's kind of like, there's a quote that Luang Por would like to say in his Dhamma talk from like now and then. It's from Anguttara Nikaya, the book of 6. But he just say the excerpt of that sutta. There are 2 results of suffering more, or get out of suffering. Like for the most people, when they're suffering, they just find some way to get out of suffering, but they didn't have, like, because of ignorance, they don't see the real way to get out of suffering. Like in back in those days, like if you don't know this trail that start in Europe, come down to the Middle East and then go through, like go to India, and then some of them go through Southeast Asia and to Australia. It's called hippie trails, which there's a lot of people kind of traveling. Like some of them are Americans who want to just bail out of this, how do you say, drafting system to be a soldier to go to Vietnam War. They're really scared of it. So some of them just, oh, I have to go somewhere else. And so many not teenagers, like young adults in Europe as well, that they're kind of fed up and disillusioned with this worldly values back then. Like just, I think you can ask maybe Tanrakito. He's kind of being in the baby boomers as well. I think he's better to. But yeah, I mean this sense that, okay, what's the deal of this life? Like many people ended up just, I have to like just this LSD drugs, and this is the ultimate happiness in my life. But I mean, few of them like Luang Por Sumeto, Luang Por Pasanno, Ajahn Jayasaro, Ajahn Amaro, all of them traveling, like almost all of them traveling through this trail, but just only them that figure out, okay, this is the way out of suffering, and I gonna study Buddhism. And yeah, this kind of like the theme of the first part, and like I mean, each part will have its own theme that you can take away. Like the part 2 will be for like newly ordained monastics, and then the part 3 will be for kind of like administrative people. In the part 4 is different. I think I still don't know how Ajahn Nisapo will write his part 4, but part 4 for me, for Thai version, I have to explain the differences between Thai Buddhism and Buddhism here in the context of, you know, the culture here and whatnot. And so it's different, but yeah, I mean, part 4, most of it is kind of like how to adapt and then how to build a solid community. That is the hallmark of Luang Por's work here. So yeah, to be continued.